Now let's talk about this last kind of headwind of the unexpected. I said there were three. You know, sometimes the unexpected happens, personal life, professional life. I used to have to explain this, but now in the pandemic, everyone gets what I'm talking about, right? Because we've all been dealing with this. One of the hardest things I had to learn how to do was fly in turbulence. Now, here's what you're thinking. Nicole, you told me you were a fighter pilot for 10 years. Certainly you've flown in turbulence before. Yes, indeed I have. In fact, I was 12 years old when I started flying at North Las Vegas Airport, 16 years old when I soloed my first aircraft. So I had flown in turbulence a lot. Now, as an aviator, turbulence is a really fascinating thing. We have these weather models that can tell you when the atmosphere is ripe for turbulence. But we can never predict exactly where turbulence is going to happen, how severe it'll be, or how long that turbulence is going to last. Does that sound familiar to anybody right now, right? We've been in a pot of turbulence for the last 18 months. And I think that turbulence for me is that metaphor for the change and the adversity that we're going through. Now, I had flown in turbulence a lot, but my friends, the first time you encounter turbulence at 500 feet, 400 miles an hour, upside down, 3 feet away from other jets, I can assure you it is an eye-opening experience. So I was out over the deserts here of Las Vegas in this beautiful diamond formation on a blue sky and tailwind kind of day. I loved this formation. Remember, things were going well for me. I'm feeling strong. And boom, all of a sudden we hit turbulence, and instinctually, I gripped that stick as hard as I could. And I started to do what was not right. I started to try to fight the turbulence. I started to try to control the uncontrollable. And with each movement of the stick, the next bump and movement had to get bigger and bigger and bigger until I got into something called a PIO, or a pilot-induced oscillation. I can assure you it makes for a terribly ugly air show. It's definitely inefficient. And at the end of the day, it was downright dangerous. And when we landed that day, after I was fighting and fighting and fighting, we got into the debrief. I knew we were going to talk about it. The number 4 pilot, the one on the far right, he's called the slot pilot. He's the one that flies underneath me and is dependent on me for his safety. He was a second-year experienced guy, Steve Horton. He said, Nicole, what were you doing out there? You were all over the place. You weren't adhering to the wingman contract. I couldn't fly underneath you. You were a mess. What was going on? And I said, bro, like, didn't you feel that turbulence? It was awful. And I'll never forget this moment. Steve Horton, right? I like to call him the man that sees all my mistakes, because he does. He looked at me and he laughed. And he said, oh, Nicole, we forgot to tell you the secret. Yeah, right? It's okay to laugh. I thought the same thing. I says, what? He says, we forgot to tell you the secret for staying in position when you encounter turbulence. Would you like to know the secret? I'm thinking, dude, that is information I could have used yesterday. Like, I would like to know the secret. He says, here's the secret. He says, we promise each other as teammates, no matter what position you're in, no matter what formation we're flying, no matter what maneuver we're about to do, we promise each other that the second any one of us encounters turbulence in our own jet, we will immediately loosen our grip. He leaned in and he says, you need to loosen your grip. Now, isn't that interesting? The exact opposite of my instincts as a pilot. And isn't that the exact opposite of our instincts as human beings when change and adversity comes along? Don't we want to try to fight it? Don't we waste a lot of energy on trying to control the uncontrollable? When we do that, it's a terribly inefficient use of your limited time, talent, and treasure. Loosen your grip. So the next day we go out and fly. It's blue sky and tailwind kind of day. I'm in the diamond formation and ba-boom, we hit the turbulence again, and I instinctually, my stomach tightens and I want to grip that stick so hard. But I thought, no, Steve Horton, he's like the Yoda of the team. So I'm like, loosen your grip. And I let go with 1, 2, 3 fingers. And I flew the jet just like this. And guess what happened? Yeah, I stayed in position. Each and every one of us did. The formation stayed in alignment, and ultimately we exited that turbulence intact as a team. And the beautiful thing is our customer, our client, the audience on the ground, they never even knew. In these hard times, it's okay to remind yourself and remind each other to control those things that you can, let go of those things that you can't. Fall back on those foundational trainings and syllabus, process, procedure. Ask for help from each other. Go to the basics. When you loosen your grip, that's how you get through the turbulence successfully, and that's how you stay together as a team. It's okay to loosen your grip. Unexpected comes along in all of our lives. It's usually quite unwelcome and disruptive as well. I mean, let's be honest, hasn't the last year and a half been a pretty unexpected environment? And I think that we can still have faster decision making in the unexpected environment. And let me tell you a little lesson that I learned from flying these Mach 2 capable aircraft. Do you know what an F-15E Strike Eagle or an F-16 does really poorly at Mach 2? I mean, really poorly. The thing it does really bad at Mach 2 is turn and change direction. You know, an unexpected environment can often take us off course or require us to make major muscle movements and major kind of decisions. I can tell you in a combat environment, sometime I can be flying along at Mach 2 and all of a sudden the enemy has a choice and they show up behind me. And I need to go ahead and, turn my aircraft at Mach 2 as fast as I can, 180 degrees, because I am required, due to shifting priorities, to go in a different way. Has this ever happened to you in your personal life? Has it happened even recently as CIOs and CTOs and tech executives in the tech industry in this pandemic, where you've been forced, by no choice of your own, to completely change direction? I know, we've all been there. And I'll tell you what, that F-15E, it hates to turn at Mach 2. It is ugly. It takes a lot of space, a lot of time, and it is a waste of fuel. So we have something to fix that. We want to be able to turn quickly and efficiently, an efficient use of our limited time, talent, and treasure, which is what you want when you have to shift direction of yourself or your teams as well. We calculate something on the ground before we ever take off called corner velocity. Corner velocity is unique to that flight, that aircraft, that day. It's dependent on the altitude, the temperature, the amount of fuel that you're carrying, the amount of weapons that you're carrying. But by quickly slowing down to corner velocity, we can make the quickest, sharpest, most efficient turn and put ourselves on a new course and re-accelerate as fast as possible. It's an instantaneous shift in performance when the situation, the unexpected environment, demands it. Corner velocity allows us to change course and re-accelerate very, very quickly. What is your corner velocity as a human being? What does it take for your team to calculate its corner velocity? Do you know what it is? What are the processes, procedures, and resources you need in place in order to quickly attain corner velocity, shift direction, and re-accelerate? You know what's interesting too about corner velocity is it doesn't just apply to your work in technology or the teams and the organizations that you're on. It also applies to you as a human being. It's been a tough year, my friends. It's been a tough year for you, for me. It's been a tough year for all of us. I'm going to shift gears on you here really quickly and share a very personal story to show you how the unexpected and corner velocity can actually affect you as a person. And it's okay to talk about human things, right? We want to create a culture where people can bring all of themselves to work, a culture where there's room for humanity, if you will, in the workplace. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, Nicole, why aren't you still in the Air Force? How did you go from being a fighter pilot to a speaker in front of us today? And I think that that's a valid question. You know, here's the thing. 3.5 years ago, I was medically retired from the military. Against my will, I went out kicking and screaming. I ended up falling severely ill. In fact, I fell severely ill with a brain infection. A brain infection caused by a tick. That's right, a teeny tiny tick bite completely broke me and forced me to change direction. It was totally unexpected. Overnight, I lost my identity as an Air Force officer, my profession as a fighter pilot, and my means for providing for my family. For 9 months, I laid in bed, unable to walk, talk, read, or write. I spent another year in rehab. And sometime during that nearly 2-year kind of episode of me being bedridden and housebound, I lost my career. And in that moment, I sat there thinking, what is it that I'm going to do? How do I find my way out of this unexpected environment? And then it hit me, this idea of corner velocity and what I used to tell my students when I was teaching them about corner velocity. This famous phrase that every fighter pilot knows. Sometimes you have to slow down to speed up. Sometimes you have to slow down to speed up. And in those words, I found the strength and the courage to be resilient, to actually be resurgent and come out of this difficult crucible experience better made, stronger. I learned how to reinvent myself, and I think corner velocity allows all of us this idea that we, you and me and your teams and your organizations, have the power to reinvent ourselves at any given time. I want to leave you with one last aviation phrase, and it's this: the runway behind you is always unusable. All you ever have is the runway that's in front of you. Love this idea of your theme being ascend. How does an aircraft ascend? It turns into its headwinds, right? Beautifully, unapologetically, and in pure acceptance, and launches into the air, right? That's how we ascend, by turning into headwinds. So I'm going to tell a very personal story, and sometimes it's kind of hard for me to tell because I want to be vulnerable with all of you. I think hopefully the last year has taught us to be a lot more vulnerable with each other. And I think that hopefully this story is a reminder that humanity has a place in your workplace, and for all of us to keep humanity in the workplace. And I share this story with a deep humility, knowing that there are people right now watching this, you, who've endured similar or more difficult things, or love somebody who has. So look at that picture in front of you. That's my husband, Paul. We'll be married 20 years in October. My twins, Garrick and Nora, who are happily upstairs on an iPad, thankful to you that they get an hour of iPad time. And also, that's just a picture of us when we used to live in Washington, D.C. And as I look at this picture, I think to myself, what gives my life meaning? What gives your life meaning? Who are you outside of work? Who are you outside of all the labels that society places on you? What is it that you individually value? It's so important for you to know what gives your life meaning. And the reason is, when the headwinds come along while you're trying to ascend to that next goal or on that next adventure, if you know what it is that gives your life meaning, just like an aircraft, it makes it easier, more efficient, and smoother to endure those headwinds when they come along. So here's my story. People ask me, Nicole, your career was awesome. Like, I was listening to Eric's bio on you. It sounded pretty good. Why aren't you still in the military? Right? That's a great question. And I'd love to still be in the military. As much as I love being here with you right now, if I could be out there wearing my nation's uniform, flying that beautiful F-15E and leading airmen on an elite performing team, honestly, that's where I'd be. But the fact of the matter is that 3 years ago, a big headwind came along in my personal life just when I was ascending to new heights. It came along and it knocked me down. I felt unexpectedly severely ill, and out of nowhere, overnight, I was medically retired from the career that I loved after being found, quote, 100% unfit for duty due to my illness. Yeah, overnight, this really amazing fighter pilot. I was physically fit, mentally fit, spiritually fit, was completely broken. Overnight, I lost my identity as an officer in the Air Force. Overnight, I lost my profession as a fighter pilot. Overnight, I lost my means of providing for my family. You see, in the summer of 2012, I was the commander of an F-15E fighter squadron. That's right. The highlight and privilege of my career was commanding an F-15E fighter squadron. It was me and 100 totally amazing, patriotic, type A, highly skillful, elite, professional, macho men, and it was good to be the queen. And we were having a good time. And in the summer of 2012, I started to feel sick, like I had the flu, little fever, little malaise, joint pain, and I had a rash on my hip too. And I went to the doctor, which is hard for pilots to do. We don't like to go to the doctors, right? Because we're afraid they're going to ground us and not let us fly. But I finally I hadn't been feeling well for like 2 weeks. And I went to the doctor and I said, I'm sick. He took a look at me. He took a look at my rash. He said, it's a spider bite, gave me some topical ointment, told me to rest and to hydrate. Well, unfortunately, it wasn't a spider bite. Over the next 3 months, my symptoms would rapidly worsen to include very scary neurological symptoms. I started having pins and needles and numbness down the right side of my body. I had a lack of coordination with my right hand. I would sometimes trip and drag my right leg. I had struggles with reading and writing. I started having problems with word finding, stuttering, and slurring my words. I also had problems with both short and long-term memory. As you can imagine, for a fighter pilot at the height of their career, this is very terrifying and scary. The doctors in the military did the best they could, but I was a bit of a medical mystery. So I forged ahead, knowing that I would never fly an aircraft again, but saying, hey, I've had a good flying career. I can still be part of this Air Force team, and I can still lead airmen. Unfortunately, as I endured that over the next 4 years, my symptoms would continue to flare.
very randomly, very unpredictable. They would wax and wane. And my symptom list grew to, well, at the end of the 4 years, I had about 63 different symptoms impacting every system in my body. I saw the best of military medicine and the best of civilian medicine until the summer of 2016, when I was serving in the White House as the military aide to then First Lady Michelle Obama. I woke up in my bed and I was locked in. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. I couldn't walk or talk. It was terrifying until my husband found me. At that point, the Air Force cut bait and they shifted me up to Boston, Massachusetts, where I was accurately diagnosed and started my recovery. My career, this amazing career, was gone in the blink of a bite. I'm a no-joke survivor of late-stage neurological tick-borne illness. A tick bite ended my career. For the next 9 months, I laid in bed with a caregiver and a home healthcare nurse, unable to walk, talk, read, or write. I spent the next year learning how to walk, talk, read, and write to be here in front of you. And during that time, the Air Force did what they had to do, and that was medically retire me. So when people ask me, Nicole, how did you go from fighter pilot to professional speaker? The answer, my friends, is I have 9 months worth of words saved up, and I am still trying to get them out, okay? All right. But seriously, I stand in front of you as someone who's a walking poster child of invisible illness. I still cannot read and write. I have major autonomic nervous system issues, and in a cruel twist of fate, I have a balance deficit that makes me get motion sick on aircraft and in vehicles. Yeah, that's funny. That's just the universe keeping me, straight. But here's the thing. People say, Nicole, you're so resilient. Resilience is important. Resilience is when mistakes and failures and bumps happen and you fall down and you bounce back to your old self. But sometimes we go through crucible experiences like the one I just shared or the whole last year that you and I have gone through that fundamentally changes and shifts who we are. I'm not resilient because there's no bouncing back to my old self. My old self is gone. I'm forged into something because of this headwind that's bigger, better, more compassionate, stronger, and able to ascend to different levels. I hope the same for all of you. I tell people I'm not resilient, I'm resurgent. I have harnessed this headwind in a way to ascend to a different level, and I believe that all of you can too. Every single one of us has the power to reinvent ourselves at any given time.